be an astronaut or a firefighter or a computer programmer, whatever it is. It will be simple, and it will be effortless. You will look amazing doing it. You will never feel like you are working. Fall in love with your work. You'll never work a day in your life. All of that bullshit. And the thing that I have found for myself to be much more worthwhile is to have work be interesting and have the work itself matter. And it can be very, very hard.
Yeah.
I have worked extremely hard for a lot of my life.
Yeah.
And this is not to say that I don't benefit from a lot of other privileges,
sure.
but and also I work very, very hard.
Right.
And the work itself is rewarding, and that makes the difficulty of it something that I'm willing to take on for myself. And this for me is where it kind of comes back to my body and my fitness goals. My intellectual goals are in many ways much more like bike repair. The bike is vastly more complicated, but computers are in some sense knowable. They aren't, technically they're finite, but they're finite in the way Africa is finite. Like, if you're exploring it on foot, it is still going to take you a very, very long time to discover the finite bounds of Africa. There are fewer right answers, but there are still right answers. You can form a lot of opinions about the world in computer programming. Bodies, to me, are mysterious, and sometimes it feels like they're playing for a different team than I am. Bodies, I have this injury. Maybe? My back hurts. We're not 100% sure why. What is the thing that is wrong with my back?
Yeah.
After 2 years, we have a whole bunch of theories, but nobody knows for sure what is wrong with my back. There are some sets of activities which are statistically likely to make my back feel worse. There are an increasing number of activities which increasingly regularly make my back feel better. Good. Sometimes my lats work. Sometimes my lats do not work. I feel like I can go to the gym, and I'll hear you say, now if you want to see someone with beautiful high bar back squat form, just watch Ross. And then the next day I show up and you say, what are you doing? And I think, that's a great question, what am I doing? And my body has just decided, you know what? I think we're wearing our hips sideways today. I'm gonna pitch left. Cool? Cool.
So
And
it's like trying to. I was reading an article about metabolism, and it was saying at this weight, at this level of lean body mass, you're going to burn about that many calories, plus or minus 50%. We don't know which direction, depends on the day and why, because there's so many. The body's not a closed system. There's so many things that impact it, and at best, you manage this. It's like you control the things you can control, you make peace with the things you can't control, and then you let go and let God. And I'm summarizing a lengthy article, but the frustrating part is even if you have an idea of all the right variables, you still, it's like in farming, you don't control the weather, you don't control the sun, you just control what you do to the soil, and that's about it.
Yeah, when sometimes I go to work and I have a bad ADD day, and it's hard for me to focus and be productive. And in some sense, I understand that. I know why that is happening. I have good approaches to help it not happen. I have certain kinds of self-care I can do to help bring myself back into a happier state. Sometimes I have bad programming days. I go try and work with computers, and computers are jerks, and it is not as successful as I wish it was. Almost always, there is something that I learn out of that experience. It might even take a little while, but eventually I'll read an article and it will say, oh, were you trying to do this thing that seems like it should work? It won't, here's why, and I'll go 4 hours of my life into
Right.
this, you know,
Of
or
course.
2 days, or 3 weeks, or whatever it is. And the maddening part about my body is sometimes I show up at the gym and I back squat and it's bad, and I may never know why. And the only answer is valuing the work. For me, if I don't show up and do the work, it is worse. It is worse to be out of the gym. It is worse to not be trying. It is worse to be stationary. And it is motivating to me that it is worse both in sort of high-minded, spiritual, conceptual ways, and I just feel worse.
Right. And the grinding feel of pain, a hot poker in your back, right?
Yeah, you know, looking up and saying, wow, I feel like hell. I haven't been to the gym in 5 days. I should really go to the gym. Is helpful. But you know, like, there are very few days that I miss. Like, it is very, very rare that I take a personal day.
Right.
I stay home from the gym because I just can't hang. And if I do, I almost always make it up that same week. And it is because it is the work itself that is important. That's, you know, like being a person who goes to the gym and valuing my own self-care means that I can do these things.
Well, and you know, those of you who don't work out with Ross every day, which there's going to be very few. But imagine, like, I think that people who get frustrated with their bodies, which is every single person, whether you're a professional athlete or somebody who's going to crunch and just doing circuits on machines, either way, you're going to have days where it feels easy, days where it feels hard, and if you're trying to progress yourself, you're going to get injured. And by injured, I just mean achy, you're going to tweak something, you're going to have a strain or a sprain, or something's not going to feel good sometime because you're going to tell your body to do something it's never done before at some point, and your body will communicate back with you, and that's what pain is, it's communication. But like, when you think about, and I, you know, when you talk about someone like Ross, who has a unique body, a unique disposition. Also, imagine going to the gym and, like you said, having days where he executes just as he always has done and it's excellent, and then having days where he's doing the exact same thing and 0 parts of the equation are doing what they're supposed to do. So imagine like going to the gym and you having to change your foot position or your grip or your breath or your tempo or making all of those adjustments just so that you can have a pain-free rep. And Ross may have to make any or none of those adjustments on any particular day and not for any particular reason. And it's a level of frustration that only people who are either elite athletes or disabled are going to be able to relate to, because most people just don't have to do that. And there's a consistency, and to carry it back to the things that you learned about working on yourself, that the work is valuable, that it means something. You see measurable, like it feels different. You see a positive result, whether you're changing your career path or your physiology. And that it's whether it takes a year or a day, it's work worth doing.
Well, and that's, I think, the last thing to add or sort of point out about this is seeing results, because much of what I have done in my life, many of the things I have pursued and done well at, the results aren't fast. When I started teaching myself how to program, I took a job which was not a programming job. They never said, "Are you a programmer?" I would have said, "No, I am not." But once I took the job, I showed up, and they said, "Could you learn a little programming?" And I said, "Well, I'm not a programmer." And they said, "We just need you to learn a little programming." And I said, "I could learn a little programming." And they said, "Great, here's programming I need you to do." And I said, "Well, but hang on." And it was 2 years before I was programming contentedly, and I stuck with it for some bloody-minded reason, because I am a person who sticks with things like that for some reason.
2 years, I have to say this, 2 years, by the way, is the minimum recommended time that Angela Duckworth recommends you try something difficult from the book Grit. She says, do something you're not good at it, but don't do it for 1 year, do it for 2, because it won't be until that second year where you actually see whether or not you've made any measurable progress.
And that was absolutely my experience. And now I'm a programming instructor. I teach this material. I know it very, very well. There's no fanatic like a convert. And like now, I'm extremely happy about programming. And I have a
There's
level,
no fanatic like a convert. I just had to say that again. Thank you. That's great.
not my line, but I cannot remember whose it is. It is, once I spent enough time doing it, it got good. And similarly, when I started working out, for my first attempt at working out was CrossFit in Oakland, and that was mostly a drag. CrossFit is an exhausting way to do anything, and mostly it's an exhausting way to reliably get injured.
To the extreme!
I got injured, and I was exhausted while I did it. Working out, training for warriors, the first year was good, and there were a lot of ways in which I feel better, but like year 2 is when I hit a 200-pound bench press, which is a big deal for me. That is, we're still at a third of the Adrian Larson numbers, but who isn't?
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Year 2 is where I feel like I'm starting to say, okay, I see how this works. I understand that this is worth it. I can observe this progress. One of the things that I do best in the world is cook. I cook very, very well. And I still have this experience every couple of years where I sort of look up and I say, wow, 3 years ago, I'm not sure I knew what I was doing. I remember what kind of cook I was 3 years ago. I used to think I was really good, but now I'm really good. And the fact of the matter is that getting better at these skills just takes time. It takes time and it takes practice.
Yep.
And this is not to say that I was actually a bad cook 3 years ago or 9 years ago. I am also a better cook now.
Right.
And the importance of valuing the work is the thing that allows me to hang in there long enough to see these benefits. Because I think, I see with my software development students, some of them try and do computers, they say, this is very hard, I'm going to stop. I want to stop. And I say, well, all right. You've been doing it for 2 months. It's hard. 2 months later, it's still going to be really hard. 6 months later, it's going to be marginally less hard. Right. In a year, you're going to feel like you're ready to start learning, and a year after that, you're going to feel like you're really ready to begin. The experience that Reed College prepared me for the best, I think, was to start Reed College. I got my degree, and I thought, my God, if I could begin freshman year with this mind, I would have gotten so much more out of it. But that is because the point was actually to get me where I was when I graduated.
That was it.
That was
Prepare
the point
for learning.
Yeah. Valuing sticking with it long enough to get good at things. And I'm not good at everything, but there are good odds that if I am good at something, it's because I've been doing it for a bit.
If you had to say, I do 3 things, what would your 3 things be?
Oh my God. Wow. I've thought about this a fair amount. My father.
Very good.
And the trick is that my mother is a jack of all trades and is sort of equally okay at a lot of things. We might need to edit this out if my mother's going to see this.
No problem. We get no problem with that.
My dad broadly is a specialist and my mom broadly is a generalist. And so I have grown up with these 2 ideas of how to be good at things. What does being good at things mean? What does it look like? I have a generalist brain. I have discovered from long exposure that is the kind of mind I have. So, friends of mine who are lawyers and have deep, complex, factual knowledge about law. That's a kind of intellect that I don't have. And friends who are able to produce incredibly sophisticated arguments, driven by different major Western philosophers, is a kind of knowledge that I don't have.
Right.
And similarly, I will never be Iron Chef France. I like too many different kinds of food.
Never say never, but I'm listening.
It's statistically unlikely that I will be Iron Chef France. On the other hand, I have learned to embrace being a generalist. So, one of the things that I'm very good at is hobbies. I have a lot of hobbies, and I do it very well and very happily.
Okay. I see what you're doing here.
Yeah, one of my hobbies is hobbies, and I knit. I used to pursue a whole number of things. It's getting a little bit less as I grow older.
Knit, RPGs, cocktail making.
Role-playing games are too, craft bartending, computer games of all sorts, working with computer hardware, computational knitting, computer code about knitting. There's a whole lot of cooking. I mean, pickling, fermenting, canning things, jams, jellies, whole 9 yards. Bike repair is a hobby these days.
Very good.
Backpacking, pretty good amateur backpacker. I'm still a good musician. It's, I'm out of practice, but I'm still a fairly capable musician. I am a very good cook. I'm quite proud of that. I also think I do myself pretty well.
Yeah.
I think I've gotten pretty good at this Ross thing. You've pointed out before, I never put things on the choose one, lose one board.
Right.
And partly it's because I am a little bit too snide for deeply sincere things. And the choose one, lose one board is so earnest, and I always want to go up to it and say, choose ham, lose my keys. Seriously, where are my keys? I'm not quite the right audience, but also I feel very content with where this project is, or I feel very peaceful about where this project is. That is not to say the project isn't ongoing.
Right.
I'm going places all the time, but I have my own drive and I have my own inertia, and I don't feel, as a member of sort of the Training for Warriors world, maybe the way I'll put this is this. The martial art that I've studied, that I connected with the most, was Tai Chi. And it is not where I've spent the most years. I spent my greatest amount of my background was in Japanese martial arts, especially Shotokan karate, and in Italian fencing. Did both of those quite a lot. A lot of training as a wrestler and in sparring. But the one I connected with the most was Tai Chi. And Tai Chi is simultaneously a very individual and very communal experience. In a traditional Chinese practice, you and a group of people get together and do Tai Chi. And it is a very unique and moving experience to sort of be around all of these people doing the same thing as you. But it's also deeply internally contemplative. It is a sort of internal peace kind of experience. A moving meditation, they sometimes call it. The Tai Chi, a lot of what I took from it is this notion of moving very intentionally through the world, that as you move, you cannot make choices about what is thrown at you. Other people will come to you, things will try and intersect your path, all of these forces will happen, and some things you have the choice of simply stepping out of the way of entirely. Some things you might not be able to choose whether or not you interact with them, but you can choose how you interact with them. The thing about Tai Chi is, or at least the specific place where I studied it, is unlike the Japanese martial arts. There was not, in the Japanese martial arts, there's a very we used to have a thing called the dojo kun, which was this recitation of our virtues, like 10 things, seek perfection of character, that the dojo sort of everyone agreed that we would all embody, this very we are pushing you to excellence in specific ways. And I see a lot of that in the Training for Warriors model. And in Tai Chi, the model was very welcome everyone. We're all going to sit and drink tea, and we're just going to talk with each other about how the week has gone while we drink some tea. And now we're just all going to take a deep breath, and we're going to do Tai Chi. We are here for the purpose of Tai Chi.
Pretty clear?
Yeah, and in some sense we don't care, why you are here to do Tai Chi. What we care about is that you're here to do Tai Chi. And there is a lot of technical mastery to Tai Chi, and we'll spend a lot of time talking about technical details. But very quickly you will come to apprehend that being good at Tai Chi is about the headspace you are in while you're doing Tai Chi, and your own internal state, and a kind of state that you carry while you're outside of Tai Chi, into Tai Chi and back out. And so for me, the dojo is a place of focus, this project that is me, but I've never felt the same need for these external hooks to sort of latch onto to try and pull my project forward. I've got the project moving.
Mm-hmm.
I know what it's doing. I know what a lot of the pieces are. There are still a lot of parts I need help with. I need help with a lot of the implementation details. I need help figuring out what the hell is going on with my hips.
Right.
I need help figuring out my back squat. I need help, getting stronger. But I've spent so long valuing and thinking about the ways I need to ask for help that I'm I feel like I can just walk in and say, here it is. This is what I need help with. I started working with a new massage therapist recently. And she said, tell me what's going on with your body. And I said, well, it expresses its back problems, but really I think I have hip problems. I've done a ton of body work and tight psoas and this and that and the other. She said, okay, well, let's see what's going on. And she did a bunch of diagnostic work. She said, I really don't think you have back problems. I think you have hip problems. And I said, that's so weird.
Yeah. What are the odds? Although you did solely the data because you pre-diagnosed yourself, which is
well, true. But I also I haven't been working on this for this long for nothing.
Right.
We have checked a lot of things. So, and the new massage therapist has every right, and it's very professional of her to check my assumptions. And if she checks and says, you know what, I can't find any back problems, your assertion checks out, then I feel more peaceful about it. But I can walk in and say, this is what I need help with.
Right.
Here are the things that I am not good at. Here's what I don't have.
When you think about help being offered but not received, this is something one of the things you mentioned when you got to read, you had connections with people for the first time, that you felt empathy, and in one definition of empathy that coming to mind, I might have just made this up, and maybe it's love or something hippie I've read, but it is I see the ability to see yourself in another person, to see not that sucks that you're suffering, but oh, I too have suffered that way. And in that way, when someone says and offers hey, you're going through this, do you need help with this? And you have that sense of connection, then it doesn't, a lot of people get frustrated, and I think for good reason, when their doctor tells them to take blood pressure medication or something. They don't see that as a problem. They don't think of their blood pressure as a problem, and there's not enough connections between them and the messenger, them and the issue. So no, I don't want help studying. That's my problem. Is I'm pissed off. It's not that I don't know how to read. It's that and so when someone gets in front of you and you can ask for help, what's the lubricant to the transaction?
So my belief is that these things break down. So if I'm trying to help somebody, the important thing I need to do is help is something we give to people. It's not something we do to people. So, and I need to let them tell their own story. Mm-hmm. Here's an example. I worked for a couple of years with my best friend in the world. And there were times, as we worked together, that I would look at her and I would say, as her best friend, I know she is having a miserable day. She could not be more unhappy. And then I'd say, how are you doing? And she would say, I'm fine, thanks. And I would say, is there anything I can help you with today? And she would say, no, thank you. I have to let her tell her own story.
Right.
She wants, like, it's a basic issue of respect. You know, if I then try and do help to her to, like, make her day better, I'm invalidating her story. I am saying, I know your story better than you know it. Like, you actually need help. In this way lies really pissing off your best friend. Likewise, sort of on that vein, the thing that I have found with myself and with my students, friends of mine, is if somebody doesn't actually want to be helped, then the depth of help you can provide is relatively low. A student says, I want help understanding programming. I could say, I've been observing you. You're always on Facebook while we're in class. You're not following the notes very carefully. You need to go reread the notes. You need to go get your head into this. You need to follow the system. And sometimes what they mean is, this thing I'm trying to do on my computer literally right now, this is the level of help I'm at. I am willing to meet them at whatever level they're asking for, as an established sort of mentor, educator, teacher, employer figure in their life. I have some standing to be able to say, here's an approach, and hey, we've gone over this. This is available to you in these places. Like, if you want to get your head around this better, I'm here. Like, I'm going to hold my hand out to you. I'm going to let you know the resources that are available.
Right.
But I can't do the work of learning software development for them.
Right.
They have to do that. They have to be in a place where it is worth it to them, where they are interested in putting in that time. One of the experiences that I had all the time, especially as I was in college, was looking up and realizing that my father had been right all along. And he had been trying to tell me, your life will be easier if you can do this. Your life will be easier if you can do that. Like, the work of doing these things to manage yourself will make your life better. And at the time he was telling me those things, I couldn't hear him. But he had the very good sense to not try and force me.
Right.
And sometimes I would be I'd be trying to solve something, and I would just remember, my father's voice would come drifting through my, make to-do lists. And I would say, to-do lists, that's wild.
Yeah.
And I'd call my dad on the phone and say, man, you remember 4 years ago when you told me to make to-do lists? You were right. And he'd sort of say, you got there eventually.
You're talking about learning and figuring out generalist brain versus specialist brain, and that I was listening to Jocko Willing talk about if you were to make elementary school, what it would look like, and he said
there would be no survivors.
Well, he said that he said what you do is you'd have all the material obviously be taught by passionate, well compensated people, but. He's like, but everything would be connected. And when you learn something in math, they'd say, and here's how it applies to these other things that you're going to go learn later today or tomorrow. And there wouldn't be this big lag time between everything, and the connections, the dots would be all drawn together very early. And that would be a purpose. Because, being a generalist, and maybe you do this, or I do this a lot, is I connect the dots to another thing I've learned that sounds like this and has similar relationships. And then I go, I bet if this applies to this, it may in some way, or some way not, but it may apply to this other thing too. And connecting the dots and making it easier. And you're talking about the influencing, you give help, it's pulled, not pushed. And another thing is that he said is, you can really only indirectly influence, because very few people in the world can be sitting in front of someone and say, do this now, and then they will take on that new thing and that new habit or whatever and do it. That's almost never, 99.9% of the time, not how it works. But if you overhear somebody telling somebody else a lesson or instructing. It's like, if you this, then you'll get that. And because it's not coming at you for some reason, because there's a lateral effect to it, you're actually less defensive and able to draw in the lesson, conclusion / strategy that they're trying to partake.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are different delivery mechanisms that we can use for the kinds of things we need to convey to people. And, a tough thing for me as an employer, especially with young people, I mean, one of my jobs is to teach them how to have jobs. Some of them have not had jobs previously. Some of them have only had weird jobs.
Right.
A thing that I resent tremendously is when people won't give me tough feedback. So there are some of my students who I have to sit down with and I have to say, like, look, you must not do activity again. Like, this thing cannot happen again, or you are fired.
Right.
And like, I think maybe for me, like, the last trick of helping someone is a certain kind of selflessness. Helping isn't about you, it's about them. They're the people who need help. They're the only people who can say if they need help. If they think they don't need help, you can have all the opinions you want, but what they think is more important. And to me, that carries over into giving people, like, honestly, any kind of feedback. I've known people who give praise as a way of making themselves look good. My employee so-and-so is so great, and under my leadership they have done such great things, and I am so proud to be running the team that has brought someone, where you're like, oh my God. Like,
It's the mom giving the very selfless speech again.
Yeah. You need to be selfless and say, like, this person has done wonderful work in their own right. And maybe they're in the context of their team, and you need to be selfless about their team. Similarly, giving people hard news. Sometimes you need to say, you need to adjust, or here's something that's going to be hard for you to hear, or here is tough information. And also, here is a hand. Like you don't have to take it. You don't necessarily have to believe me that this criticism is real.
Right.
But, I need to tell you that a thing is true, and also, here is everything I am willing to do to try and help you make good choices and be successful around the criticism I've just given you. A thing about your style at the gym that I appreciate very much is that looks great, and we're going to make it even better like this. You have managed to achieve this kind of, like, positive momentum in your coaching style, and it's a thing that I have tried to figure out how to emulate in a lot of ways as an employer, and it doesn't carry over perfectly. Sometimes I have to sit down with a student and say, you need to not be sexist to other students. Like, you just can't. Like, there's no positive way for me to put this. If you do this again, I will fire you. Don't do this.
Right. There's no way around that,
Yeah, that is where we are. But yeah, I think if you want to be really helpful to people, you've got to listen to them, you've got to let them tell their story. Helping somebody without them asking is a deeply intimate thing to do. Mm-hmm. I do that with my partner, who I've known very, very closely for a while, and I can say, she is having, an awful, stressful time right now. I'm just going to take care of dinner tonight. Like, she's going to come home, and I'm going to have made dinner. That is just going to be good news.
Right.
I know her, I know how she works. We've done this, I have a track record, this is going to be okay.
It's proven successful.
But also, there are plenty of times where I say, what can I do? How can I support you? Like, who can I be in this situation? Because it changes, because humans are different from day to day.
What do you do with, I want to tie this in because we're going on an hour and a half, I think, and this is a lot of good material, and I want to do maybe a follow-on Q&A.
Okay.
We're going to transcribe it, and there's a couple of things I already knew I wanted to go back to and say, can we get deeper in this? So maybe I'll email you some stuff. But The thing that you keep saying is, it's you're a resource for the person who's directing their own care, and then I'm sure, because you were young people young people are the worst. When it comes to wanting a solution to a either extremely tertiary problem, and the actual problem is deep to the issue at hand, or unrelated, or completely unrelated, which I've also seen in my own life trying to solve a problem. It's actually not my problem at all.
Yeah.
So what do you do when like someone's asking for help how to make tea, and what they really need to do is stop using recreational drugs for a while?
Woo! Okay. So there are a set of problems so complicated and so tough and so big that, I think an attitude that it's very easy to have when you care about people is you look at somebody you care about and you say, I need to figure out how to help you. I need to figure out how to help you solve this. And it can have a lot of permutations. Like, I have a friend who's in an abusive relationship. He has been for many years. And I would love nothing more than to sweep it out of the sky and just snatch him out of that relationship and like leave a breakup note in like him-shaped outline of dust where he used to be standing, and put him in a different city and give him a new life. This is never going to happen,
right.
And it wouldn't work if I did it.
Right.
The difficulty, I think, of these huge problems, of all problems, but they're not ours to solve. They belong to the person who has them. And, I think peace in relationships is often about letting other people own their own stuff. You can negotiate different behaviors you need. You say, I have a boundary about messiness, you're messy. Like, can you respect my boundaries about messiness? But you can't solve the problem of being messy for the other person. That's where you start fighting infinitely.
Right.
The trick with certain sizes of problem is that they become so painful for us to watch that we start thinking of them as our problems, I think. That we start experiencing them in this way that makes them kind of visceral and real, and we want to just fix it. For us, it's a different problem. It's a different problem for us than it is for them.
Yeah.
We're trying to help them make tea. They are on a lot of drugs. We are not on a lot of drugs. For us, the problem is simple. Stop drugs. For them, they have a whole neurochemical armada of reasons why they cannot do this. And that is before, and addiction is all before we get to any kind of neuroatypical behavior they have, or, whatever their psychological past is, or trauma, or manic expressive behaviors, or the whole list of things. This is why I say that, like, people have to want to fix these things. Because, just like it is learning a new skill. It's going to take 2 years. Like, you're not going to be good at it until you've done it for a while. And, like, my experience so far is that if I try and do help to the people who need that much help, it's actually alienating. For some reason I always feel like an asshole if I trot out Nelson Mandela quotes, but Mandela said a thing that has stuck with me every day since I heard it. Our greatest fear is not that we are weak. Our greatest fear is that we are powerful beyond our wildest imagining. Our greatest fear is not that we are incapable of fixing something. Our greatest fear is that we have been able to fix it all along. We could have stopped having this problem at any time, and we just haven't been for some reason. I think that is true of a lot of people, and I think if you try and do help to people, you go to them and you say, Bob, you must stop heroin. Maybe you're going to have some big, elephant in the room, come to Jesus tear fest where Bob's like, I know, I must quit heroin. But in some sense what you're doing is making Bob confront his own weakness and his own difficulty with heroin and his own inability to stop it himself. And until Bob is ready to tackle that his own damn self, nothing's gonna budge. You know, my friend in the abusive relationship, like I got too pushy about like, hey, you need to get out of that relationship, and he stopped talking to me for 3 years. And now we're talking again, and when he says things are incredibly shitty, I say, I love you and you deserve to be well. Like, you are a good person I care about, and I want you to be happy, and you deserve to be happy. And how can I help? How can I, like, is there a way, like, what can I do right now? And usually it's just listen.
Yeah.
And someday, maybe things will get better, you know? If that person needed it, I would fly to where he is, like, anytime with no notice to, like, help him get out of that shit. But until he starts getting himself out of it, there's just nothing that's gonna happen. And it's hard for us to live with the pain of watching someone we care about with a problem of that severity. And I think it's, in some sense, a useful metaphor to think of it like a serious illness. Because, like, you can't just decide your parents out of having cancer. Like, there is no, like, action you can undertake. It does nothing for them if you try and do help to them.
There's no intervention. You're not
You
going to
know.
have intervention on the cancer.
You know, similarly, like, you know, I personally do not believe in these kinds of interventions for a lot of other things. You know, when I'm talking to a young, healthy person who is also very neuroatypical, or who has said something really dumb to another student, or who has expressed racist views, or who just has weird personal habits, like, I'm talking to a sound person and I can say, here's some tough news, also let me help.
Yeah.
But I am not myself convinced that there is anything more effective we can do for people in tremendous pain than love them and tell them that we think they deserve to be happy, and hope that someday they hear us and move towards that in their lives. Take themselves on as a project.
Take yourself on as a project. That's the beginning of the beginning.
That's winding up on a t-shirt, isn't it?
That is on its way to a t-shirt. That's, if it's not already, I don't understand why it wouldn't be, but, there was tons of things. I'm really glad that we have good audio on this, because, I'm gonna go through the transcript, and I'm gonna send you a couple of key questions to expand on, because there's a bunch of stuff that you mentioned that was like tip of the iceberg, and a little bit on just like strategies and things that got you through your time at Reed. But wow, took a whole new direction, and I was totally not. I didn't see us going there. But Ross, thank you so much for your time.